Hey everybody, I'm reading the Stormlight Archive and I'm now on the second book, which is Words of Radiance. And when I read the first book, I took a pause after the prologue and I decided to analyze that prologue and see if I could make any guesses on what's happening just based on the prologue. So that's what I'm going to do here with this one as well. And as much of Brandon Sanderson's work is, this one is full of hints for the future, but also hints of things that have already happened as well. And what's really cool is it's essentially the exact same prologue that we had at the beginning of the first book, but just from somebody else's perspective. So if in the third book we get the prologue again, but from another perspective, same thing, then, well, I don't know, it's already very cool. But let's talk about what happens in the prologue and what I think may happen because of this. So we open up and the perspective that we're getting for this one is Jasnah, which is very exciting. I already really like Jasnah, and the reason being is she seems very certain of who she is, what she's trying to achieve, and how she is going to get there. More than almost any other character that we've looked at so far from the very first book. She seems extremely intelligent, and I'm just excited that maybe this means we're going to get more perspectives from Jasnah in this book. And immediately we find out that she is planning murder, and not necessarily herself going to commit the murder, but she's going to employ somebody else. She's off to meet an assassin. And immediately my head starts reeling. The first thing that pops into my head is, surely she's not planning the murder of her father, but I dismissed that almost immediately because I don't think she would do that. So we discover pretty quickly that the murder that she's not necessarily planning immediately, but is working towards, is the murder of her brother's, I can't remember if it's his wife or his betrothed or just his current girlfriend, but that is who she's planning on murdering. So of course that begs the question, why? Why is this person someone that she's planning on murdering? And there could be a few different reasons. It could simply be that she has offended Jasnah, but I very much doubt that. Jasnah doesn't seem like the type of person to plan murder because of this. It could be because she is a threat to the crown. That's much more likely. Or maybe she simply has betrayed her brother and he doesn't know about it, something along those lines. However, another thought popped into my head, and something that popped into my head, that maybe this woman is an enemy on a deeper level. And those that we already know to be Jasnah's enemy, granted I don't know if it's going to be her enemy now, this is more in the current time frame that we know these people are her enemy, are the Ghost Bloods. So is there a small chance this woman is related to them? Potentially, but I just don't see why she wouldn't be able to go and talk to her brother about that if that was the case. Why does she need her watched? There is always the chance that her brother is wrapped around his wife or girlfriend's fingers. That definitely could happen. So those are my thoughts as to why we open up with her going to meet an assassin who she wants to watch and then potentially murder her brother's girlfriend. Also, in the first book, The Way of Kings, I really don't remember Elokar having a love interest. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I just read over it and didn't pay attention. But I really don't remember him having a wife. So that would mean, if I'm correct and I haven't misremembered, that would mean that this woman dies, or at the very least is parted from this royal family line between this scene and where we get to. And there's very much a good chance that Jasnah was involved in that, if that's the case. So very similar to Zeph walking through the party and noticing a few different things, we also get Jasnah walking through the party and noticing a few different things. The first thing that strikes me is the fact that Sadeas isn't in the main room with everybody else. Sadeas is walking from somewhere else, and although I don't really know what that could mean, I am obviously very suspicious of Sadeas. Could he have been the snake that we now know him to be way back then? I don't think so. So I don't want to make the mistake of trusting Sadeas again like I did with all my predictions in the last book. But he does seem quite loyal to Gavilar, and he also doesn't seem to have much hatred towards Elokar, but who knows? I've been wrong before with Shadesmar, so I don't feel confident saying that he has nothing to do with it, but I can't see any concrete clues that he is to do with the murder of Gavilar at this moment. So as Jasnah's walking through the party on her way to meet this assassin, she notices that her shadow is facing the wrong way. And we've seen this one time before, maybe a couple of times before, but definitely one time that I can remember. And I believe it was the Collector. So we had a very short snippet, I think it was an interlude, where the Collector notices that his shadow is the wrong way around as well. And then she sees this oily black figure, which is kind of like the symbol heads, but wasn't described to be the same thing. And she falls into Shadesmar. And this is our second encounter with Shadesmar. And Shadesmar seems to be made up of all these glass beads, so to speak. And every time she comes into contact with a glass bead, the bead seems to give an impression of a real thing. Now we know, well, we don't know, but based on what she says in this chapter, Shadesmar is the land of the Spren. And I don't know how this all ties together. And if you watched me predicting in the previous book, and if you have read this series and this is the first of my series that you're watching, you should go back and watch those. The Spren is extremely frustrating because normally I feel like I get enough clues where I can make some decent guesses and at least feel confident about my own guesses, whether they're right or wrong. And I can take those clues and I can say, yes, I feel confident about this guess. But what Brandon Sanderson has done this time round is he's created the Spren. And although he's given me ample clues, I feel like I really have no idea how they fit into the story. And it very much frustrates me. Some things that I do feel relatively confident on is the reason she is able to go there is simply because she is able to change the world around her. She's in soulcast without a soulcaster, which we discovered in the previous book. How much she knows about her own abilities, I don't know at this point. Obviously, this is 6 years previous. But what she does while she's in Shadesmar is she kind of creates the Herald. And I think it's the one that we meet at the end of the first book and at the start of the first book as well. And the Herald of War, I believe he is. And the oily figure that I'm saying currently is a symbol head, but I might be wrong, decides to salute her. And she also focuses really hard on the palace and turns a lot of those glass balls into the palace to kind of rise her way up and out. And there's a lot of clues there. Obviously, it's very much based around what she can do to change the world around her. And I have a feeling that one of the orders of the Knights Radiant, so one of the heralds, I think maybe run each order. That's my guess here with the heralds. Because there seems to be, I think there's 10 orders of the Knights Radiant. I don't know, but there's definitely 10 heralds. So I would guess each order of the Knight Radiant has a different ability tied to different Spren, which would mean the Spren are tied to the Knights Radiant, and maybe the Spren were tied to the heralds as well. So one guess that I felt like kind of confident on, which isn't even really related to this prologue, it was just me ruminating on the Spren, is... So with each herald, I feel like maybe different Spren were related to this herald, and therefore we know the Spren were definitely related to the Knights Radiant. And in the previous book, our prophet, the Black Fawn, he is getting visions, and one of the visions he has is when the Knights Radiant lay down their arms. And I have a feeling maybe the Knights Radiance lay down their arms and the Spren lay down their arms as well. And I don't know why, but I feel like maybe they discovered that the 9 heralds left the 1 herald behind, and therefore we needed that herald to be spat back out into the world before we were going to be able to properly fight the last desolation. And that doesn't even really make sense when I talk about it now, but it's something along those lines. But anyway, I'm babbling. She goes to Shadesmar. I don't know what the Spren are. I don't know how they fit in, but they are super awesome. Let's move on. So Jasnah has her meeting with the would-be assassin. The would-be assassin's name is Liss, and she has a shard blade, it would seem. She's also known as the Weeper, so it's a cool name. I'll keep an eye out for it, but I just feel like her story kind of ends here. So she has an assistant called Kalak, I think his name was. Is it Kalak? Talak. Kalak was the guy from the prologue in the first book. And essentially what happens is she lets slip that Zeph was her assistant for a little while. So after the murder of her father, I think that maybe Jasnah gets a hold of that shard blade. So potentially Jasnah has a shard blade as well. Don't know that for certain, but maybe. But where the really interesting thing comes in is when the Azish man and the smaller guy come round the corner. And Jasnah hears them talking to each other. She hears them saying something along the lines of, "We are getting worse. I can feel us getting worse," which would obviously at a bare minimum mean that they're going through some kind of change. They also say, "The creature carries my lord's own blade." And who was speaking to these two people in the first prologue? It was Elokar, if I remember correctly. So the facts that I think we have are Elokar was definitely talking to the Azish man. The Azish man and his partner know that the creature has their lord's blade. Don't know what the lord's blade could mean. Maybe a herald's blade or a shard blade. Most likely a shard blade. Does that mean they definitely gave it to Zeph? No, not really. And we also know that the Parshendi took the blame or took the credit for hiring the assassin, which is weird because it was definitely that they were described as surprised the first time round. How do all of those fit together? I mean, the arrow would be pretty much pointing to Elokar deciding, well, telling the Parshendi about what his dad was going through, probably visions and crazy things, and them deciding that they needed to kill him somehow, which would kind of explain why Elokar is so paranoid all the time. Maybe that something similar is happening to him, or maybe that someone will find out that he was the one who tried to have his father killed. So what's going to happen in this book? I am dead certain that Elokar doesn't make it out the back of this book. I think that Elokar dies, and I think it's going to happen. Well, I don't know when in the book it's going to happen, but I think it kind of has to happen for the story to move forwards. It has to happen for Sadeas and the Blackthorn to finally go head to head with each other, because they're going to be pretty constrained at the start of this book due to not wanting to split up the Alethi kingdom. I also think that Elokar will want to keep Dalinar away from the Parshendi, even though Dalinar is getting more and more and more intrigued by the Parshendi, because by all rights I feel like they stick to the codes the most out of everybody. Plus they spoke with each other on the battlefield, and one of them said they were looking for Dalinar, so it's going to be an interesting one. And I think Elokar would even banish Dalinar and his people, including Kaladin, if it turned out he wanted to get close to the Parshendi. If Elokar did indeed order the death of his father, because Dalinar would find out. So I may be completely wrong on all of this, and that's the fun with guessing. However, sometimes I do manage to get at least a couple of nuggets of truth. And what I'm mainly hoping is that we get a lot more of Jasnah and Shalorn in this book. I had the best time with Kaladin, and Kaladin is my hero. Blackthorn is fantastic, and that whole Alethi storyline is amazing. But I feel like Jasnah and Shalorn need to take center stage in this. I need to learn a bit more about the Spren, please. It's frustrating me so much. And I do think that, although I believe Jasnah and Shalorn are heading to the Shattered Plains, and they will spend more time with the Parshendi, I have a feeling that those two storyline is going to take them back to Shalorn's homeland, and I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later, because I'm very intrigued with Shalorn's background, what her father was looking for with those maps, and what the Ghostblood's motivation is to be searching down the same path as Jasnah as well. So that's what I hope I get. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. These come out pretty regularly, almost every single Sunday at 10 a.m. Central American time. Other than that, I will see you next time.